Yo, FitBiz Podcast listeners, welcome to today's episode. This is part 2 of interview that we had with Trevor Kashey. So every month we have guest experts into our private client community inside of IFCA. And Trevor was this month's coach, and I had to share this episode with you all because it's so valuable. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go back and do that first. It's going to be important. But Trevor is a fucking genius. The dude earned his Ph.D. in biochemistry at 22 years old. He was working on cancer research when he was 14. He's a really successful online fitness coach. But the cool thing about Trevor is he's really become obsessed with behavioral change. All right, how to communicate to clients in a way that actually get them to do what you want. In his words, he says, to get them to do less dumb shit and do more smart shit. Where oftentimes as coaches, we just want to tell people what to do or what they should do. But the problem with that is, as humans, we've been inundated since we were children to despise that language. Like, hey, do it this way or don't do that. So we have this, almost this innate subconscious block towards that kind of language. So instead, if we can learn how to use these ninja Jedi language tools to lead people into their own discovery and to get them back on track, man, you're going to avoid client drop-offs, missed check-ins, people not getting results. And a lot of it has to do with how you communicate to your clients. We also talk about how to gamify your coaching process to make them excited at every milestone, how to simplify language in your marketing and how you communicate with clients. This is just one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. So I'm excited to share it with you. This is part 2. Reminder, if you haven't listened to part 1, go back one episode, check that out. And hope you enjoy. I know you're going to. This interview's awesome. Dr. Kashey, I've got an interesting exercise I want to conduct if you'd be open to it.
Sure, man.
So I'd love to set this up for everybody in a really practical example. Let's pretend like I'm Susie and I'm a client of yours. And we get in a check-in. I'm early in the process, couple of weeks, and you've given me some directives, some things to work on. And I come to you and I'm like, Dr. Kashey, I did terrible this week. Everything's fucked. The scale's not moving. Everything's shit. Like, how would you approach a conversation with that client to give them a measurable win to work towards and get them back on track?
Okay. Interesting question. Well, for one, I will go to the absolute minimum level of validation possible if I have to. Like, when I look at these situations, I ask myself the question, how would you talk to a suicidal person with a gun? How simple of directions would you give them? How direct would you make what you say? I mean, some of us might panic, but pretend that you have experience talking to suicidal people with guns for a second. Maybe you do. And you might have an idea that probably want to keep your language positive. And positive confuses people. I use it in a more, technical way, because positive people tend to think like happy, joy. But no, I actually mean eliminating negative modifiers. For instance, if I'll use the girlfriend example or the boyfriend example. I'll use my wife as an example. Okay. If she walks out of the dressing room and says, "Do I look fat?" Do I say A, "No, you don't look fat," or B, "You look great"? Which one takes more processing power to determine the meaning? What dominant word do you think of when I say, "No, you don't look fat"? Okay, so now we get an idea of positivity. So in that regard, if I say, "No, he's not very smart," I would actually consider that negative language versus "he's dumb," which I consider, strictly speaking, positive. And so I mean actually the elimination of negative modifiers to make the language more direct and easier to understand. Because really, negative modifiers economize language. It allows you to have half the vocabulary, because you could just add "not" or before and after things. And when instead you could use a more direct word that, quite frankly, makes it easier for the other person to understand. Now, it burns more calories for you, so that goes back to the smaller sooner reward or the larger later one. It takes a lot of effort to speak in a positive, present tense, action-oriented sort of dialect. It takes practice and it takes energy. Although I have done my darndest to speak in that way for many years now, and I have built a skill. So at the very least, now that we have that sort of context, I can at the very minimum level, I can congratulate the person for reporting to me.
Yeah.
Like, you did a fantastic job. Do you know how many people would screw up and just like leave? You actually told me what you did.
Yeah.
That puts you in the top 1%. I would know. I have data. I do science stuff. And so just the fact that you told me makes you 100 times better performing than the typical person.
Yeah. And think how much that changes the next time it happens, because you know that it will, right? The clients who ghost, how much that will avoid that happening again, right?
And you do it by telling the truth. You state the facts. Do I have to say, no, you did fine, it's amazing? No, you just lie to the person then, and they know it, and this gets awkward. And they say, well, you're just humoring me. Like, you know how many people, just like when they screw up, they say, bye, see you later. I don't want this guy to yell at me. You know why clients ghost when they mess up? Because they want to avoid your punishment.
Yeah.
And so imagine what happens when you positively reinforce the person apparently screwing up. Now, that gets a little bit confusing, but if you consider the delay, the positive reinforcement actually comes with the behavior immediately preceding what they did. So although they screwed up during the week, whatever that means, they deviated from the rules you prescribed, let's just call it that, to stick to the facts, okay? When you positively reinforce something, it means you introduce something into the context that raises the probability they do that thing again. In this case, I will reinforce them checking in.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Lowers the probability they avoid me if they mess up.
Yeah.
And so now I've created breathing room for both of us. So for one, you did a freaking fantastic job emailing me, because about 1,000,001 people would say like, nah, this Dr. Kashey guy, he'll beat me into the ground and make fun of me for acting stupid. I even get like, even now I like get so upset. Like, let me love you. Let me love you, you know? And I use that term sometimes, depending on the context. And so now I've built this breathing room and said, okay, you did good enough. And so I have this other sort of parable spiel, whatever you want to call it, where like, because of the perfectionistic sort of behavior people have, this dichotomous all or nothing, I either did it exactly or I failed. I pound in this idea of good enough. Do you know what good enough means? It means good enough. I try to make things equal to themselves as much as possible. Some philosophers and academics get irritated at that, but returns is returns is returns. It stays true each time. So now, could you do better? Now we can state the facts. Absolutely, you could do better. If you did perfect, why would you talk to me, fool? We can get a little irreverent. Like, frankly, you've acted a little bit silly. If you could do things perfectly and follow directions the first time, you could have picked up a book and followed the directions exactly and made $10 billion and bought your own island and screw this Dr. Kashey guy. But you recognize that you could use a little help. So let me help you.
Yeah. That's powerful.
So I can get as upset or as funny or as silly as I want. I will tell you that I tend towards irreverence, which means that I will do my darndest to make the person's problem look as silly to them as possible so they can laugh at themselves. If you can laugh at your own problem, then you've got some serious breathing room to work with. Because really, like, yeah, I do act silly. I threw a fit. I wanted to avoid you. And like, great. And now you know for sure you did a good job by checking in. Do you know how they know they did a good job by checking in?
Because
I told
them that.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the way that our culture tends to operate with rule following, we tend to ignore people that follow the rules and punish people that divert from them.
Yeah.
How many people actually get rewarded for doing the things they got told to do? Almost never. How many times do people get punished for doing something different from the rules? A lot. Do you know what that creates? A coercive relationship. not a coaching relationship. And so I will figure out whatever the person did well, because frankly, they messaged me. And I consider that, but like, can this even happen unless they message me? No. Or they contact me in some way, which means at the very least, they did the most important thing they could possibly do.
Yeah, no, that's super powerful, guys. Was that helpful? Maybe comment and just how that's going to perpetuate more positive behaviors due to your positive nature, right? It's simple enough and things should be simple, right?
And you can do it by stating the facts.
Yeah.
Like so
100%.
many people try to encourage, and that just ends up forcing lies, and everybody knows that. So give me a break.
Yeah.
Point out what they actually did well, because they did do something well. And if you have a problem figuring that out, well, then you know where to find me.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask you a question that's related to that. And then I want to open it up for a few Q&A for the crowd, because I'm sure you guys are chomping at the bit to pick Dr. Kashey's brain. I want to ask you this. So learning to communicate effectively is obviously something that you're passionate about and should be of high importance to all of us, especially in the business that we're in, which is the people business. Can you maybe share some tips? It's a kind of a two-pronged question. Some tips on how to just to more effectively communicate, right? Maybe some frameworks, some processes that you've used that have been effective. And also, do you have any just tactical tips on how to make things simpler for clients to understand? And I think what we do as coaches, especially in the beginning, we want to provide as much value as we possibly can. So we interpret value as information, as here's how the Krebs cycle works, rather than here's how to eat better. Can you just explain how to simplify?
Yes. First, I want to call out Amy. Amy, do you think I acted soft in anything I said?
Amy, you can unmute yourself too.
Sometimes I feel like you have to be hard. Did I sound soft?
Amy, go ahead and unmute yourself.
And I seriously, right? I feel curious.
I'm not sure if Amy is able to talk.
Well, even again, I'll leave it, because I understand the compulsion, the impulse to make yourself hard. Now, if we understood what hard meant, that would make the conversation easier, obviously. But I get very hard with people. I still state facts. I still limit some. I would say more than limit. You can stay hard and firm with a person and insult them 0 times and punish them 0 times. Frankly, just stating the facts. Oh, good. So great follow-up here, right? So thank you for no, I didn't sound soft. And so I totally agree that acting firm with a person helps. Taking out, exercising your authority helps people. I get very mad, Amy. Obviously, I get very excited, but I get mad for them, not at them. And that difference makes all of the difference in the world. Now, could I stand to have a calmer demeanor? Absolutely. We all could sometimes, me in particular. But really, I make it part of my coaching persona so that I can do this, and then the person also might pay more attention. And so when you talk to somebody in this sort of media platform, like in person, I operate different than something like Zoom like this. So online, you might see me as a 1.5-inch square. I got to act as obnoxious as possible so I have a larger probability you pay attention.
Of course.
Now in person, I can go back and forth with the person. They get easier to read, body language, all that sort of stuff makes it easier to do some things and some difficult. Yes, exactly, Amy. Great for parenting. Do you see any difference between coaching and parenting? Because frankly, I have a hard time discriminating. You just have tinier people that make weirder face noises. But what do? You bridge the gap between things they suck at until they get good. Fight me. Fight me. And I say that at half joke. Half. So now, to get back to the question about simplifying things, and teaching people complex stuff, I would argue, frankly, I follow the Feynman route a little bit, that if you know a subject well enough, I'll put it this way. If you have trouble making a concept simpler, you probably need to learn it better. because learning things involves, in so many terms, saying it in your own words. And if you have trouble simplifying things, that means you still have gotten yourself at the stage where you say it in somebody else's words. And so if you get to the point where like, okay, now I totally get this. I tried to define my terms as I went a little bit. Like if you asked a random person what strategy meant, they'd probably do it in a circle. They probably say, well, you make a plan. Well, then plans and strategies mean the same thing. And so now you just have, you just use the synonym. And so that creates another monster. So like when I mean strategy, I mean make decisions ahead of time. I spend a lot of time thinking about that. Maybe an embarrassing amount of time to some people. Like entire weeks of my life trying to turn words into that level of, that simple of language. So that gives you step one. Like if you have legitimate difficulty simplifying something, then I would actually look in the mirror and say, do I know this as well as I think I do? And you probably don't, in which case I say, great, I love learning stuff. So I love that. If I trip over my words, I would say, I think I could go do some homework on this and I'll get back to you. So do I try and hide that I know nothing about this thing? You say, no, it looks like I know about jack squat about this thing, although I feel confident I can learn about it, so I'll get back to you. One of the best things ever about the sort of upbringing I had in the community I had. Like when you sit in front of, like if you talk to a Nobel laureate, like do you try and hide? Do you try and make stuff up about things that no. Like you get called out immediately by people who know way more about stuff than you. And so when I present a bunch of data and this guy who has studied this field for 50 years goes, what does that mean? I say, hell if I know, I came here to ask you. Why do you think I presented all this stuff? I want your help. And so sometimes I go that path too. So again, step one, like, do you actually know this as well as you think? Probably not. And if so, good. That gives you an opportunity to say, you know what, I want to learn this a little bit better. And then I want to show you what I learned. Does that feel okay? And now you have an opportunity for more communication with this person. Plus you've done them a favor. The delay, I think, matters very little when you end the conversation with, like, you asked a very good question, and I want to make sure I get this right for you. Does that sound fair? Mm. And that might mean, okay, now I go learn about this thing for a day until I can actually summarize it in a way, to use the silly Feynman sort of style, like, can I explain it to the 5-year-old sort of thing? Secondarily, for simplifying complicated concepts to people, when it comes to learning specifically, or behavior or psychology, they'll kind of mean the same thing to me. I will tell you that people can only learn things when you compare them or put them next to things they already know. Mm. And the more times you do that by successive approximation or baby steps towards the ideal, you can get them to the super complicated thing, right? You learn about an electron in 6th grade, and before you know it, they go, electrons don't even exist. They're actually waves, but wait, just kidding. And so really it takes that many. Now, you could go through those steps much faster, right? If you just did this over and over, but they have those steps. The pedagogy exists for that reason. So all this mumbo jumbo to say that if you actually know things about the person, then you can use things about them to teach them things they know nothing about.
Yeah, that's great. This might be a loaded question. What are your top 2 or 3 most go-to analogy statements that you use with clients?
Okay, I will say that I have an emotional one. It depends on the type of person, but I'll throw you a couple of them. I will say that if you learned how to do something one way, which you did, you can learn how to do it another way. Period. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that one of my favorites. So a lot of people think I'm stuck like this forever, but like, you learned to do this either on accident or on purpose. In either case, who cares? Since you learned it this way, you can now learn it another way. Mm-hmm. You can now learn something more effective. How do I know you could learn something more effective? Because you learned this. And so we already have proof you can learn the thing.
Yeah.
So I'll weave self-efficacy in there too. We already have proof you could do it. You just do it in a way that helped you then. And now you can learn a way to do it that helps you now. All that booze you drank earlier on in life, that now you feel compelled to drink now and hate yourself, that all that alcohol, all that excess consumption, it did something for you then. It does something different now. And so again, you can stretch this any way you want. I pulled out the alcohol thing, but really, like, if you look at things as skills, as things people learn to do, then they can learn something else. If you look at things as like personality traits or willpower or all this other stupid crap that makes it seem like a person just comes into the world with them, good luck changing anything.
Yeah.
True or not. Okay. So looking at that standpoint, looking at the human as an organism, a dynamic system capable of change, remind them of that. Okay. So I use that as one. I love the good enough. Like, you did good enough. You can also do better.
Yeah.
Can you always do better? Yes. Does that make it bad? Like, I could do everything better. I do things good enough. And so recognizing that you do something good enough and you can do better gives you the breathing room for like, okay, I can get by right now. If I do better, I would get better. And that works way different than like, okay, I absolutely failed and therefore I quit.
Yeah. And I love that, because in both of those examples, you're using a positive reinforcement with a, let's also work on this.
Yes. Yeah. Like, yeah, you did a crappy job. Like, it happens. You did good enough though. Like, I mean, you can, again, with the hardness and the reverence, again, it just depends on the sort of rapport you have with the person.
Yeah.
Like, if you know the person well, I can be like, yeah, Todd, you really sucked it this week.
Yeah.
So like, help me understand the context here so that I can put you in this position again on purpose and you can show me what you can really do.
Yeah.
And so then what do? We make a strategy. We decide ahead of time. We look at the context, the high probability, high risk situation where the person did screw up. Admittedly, they deviated from protocols so far they regressed. They sucked. Okay. Now, instead of like, well, I went into this situation, it just happened. What do I do? Oh no. What does that mean? It means you have the task and the skills deviating. Okay, so what can we do? It means we engineer the situation so that you can practice or set the stage for feedback so that you can improve your performance. So when you go into that situation on accident again, you know what to do, how to do it in a way that helps you.
Yeah.
Hopefully that sort of frame ends up making things simpler.
That's great.
If you suck in this situation, then practice in this situation. I feel like it makes it like pretty simple to me anyway. I could try and simplify it if you want. And sometimes that means you manufacture the situation. You know, cue the military, cue surgeons, cue fighter pilots. They all train in manufactured situations.
Yeah.
You pull the fire alarm and all the little kids walk out of the building. Okay, well, what happens when an actual fire occurs and they hit the fire alarm? The little kids walk out of the building. One situation you have manufactured, one situation you have the real deal. But really, you have a stimulus prompting the effective behavior.
Yeah, I love that. So that's a way that you can draw like the long-term benefit of these mistakes actually happening. We're in situational, we're practicing, right? I love that, Dr. Kashey. And I want you guys also to just really pay attention, not just to what Dr. Kashey is saying, but how he's saying it. And I think that is one of the most important components of communication to get people to stick. I love Albert Einstein's quote where he says, I rarely teach my pupils as much as I get them into an environment to want to learn. And guys, how many of you on this call right now are actually learning because of the way that Dr. Kashey is communicating? I think that's a powerful thing to observe. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up and open it up to a few questions. Dr. Kashey, do you have some time? I don't want to stretch you too thin.
Actually, let me check ye olde calendar for a moment. I have something I got 20 minutes.
20 is perfect.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and jump in, guys. Who wants to start? Actually, we'll go typical drop one in the comments. Ben, you're already ahead of us, so we'll go Ben first.
Thank you, Dr. Kashey. Really enjoyed this so far.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Where do you think is a good place for me to start on learning a lot of the concepts you're teaching as far as behavioral coaching goes? I love your thought process. I like your approach to this, and I think like I could definitely personally benefit more from this. How would I go about it?
Okay, so I will start the question I start every conversation with, from 4-year-olds to presidents. What problem do you want to solve?
I want to be the most effective coach at empowering my clients, and I believe your system, what you've taught us today and told us about, is the method I would like to try or implement.
Okay. What sort of clients do you work with?
I typically work with career-driven women, typically moms who have kind of forgotten about themselves, and they're at a point where they are now ready to change the path they're on.
Okay. So what sort of outcome measure how do you know they did good? How do they know they did good, more specifically?
Well, what I typically coach all of my clients on is really not the result, it's the process. Like, how do we become more efficient at the process, at choosing healthier foods, making better decisions?
How do they know they got more efficient at your process?
Weekly check-ins. We do weekly check-ins when I have like a check-in form. I ask them a ton of different questions, and I go over in detail each of them with them. And then also a community group that I have, we do a lot of just encouraging there.
Okay, so strictly speaking, you give them questions, and if they answer the questions in the way you find satisfactory, you say good. Bear with me here. Like I make it sound silly, but like I do this on purpose.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, good. So again, like the reductionist sort of stuff, it can sound insulting, but really, like if you, again, how I approach things, like I literally say face noise, right? So really, like, basically you send them, you give them things to do, in this case, like directives, and then you send them like a survey or questions, and then they respond back to your survey and questions. Okay. So I think, just generally speaking, if you have let's just assume like a ground zero sort of, I'll put in the chat. This book by Karen Pryor. You know how people say dolphins are really smart?
Yeah.
She did that. Okay.
Okay.
You know, have you heard of clicker training? She did that. So like, she wrote like the real Atomic Habits, like, okay. And so she actually takes a career from like as a biologist who actually figured out that dolphins can do intelligent things. And then she started taking that and also applying it into human situations with massive success. Although she still operates as an animal trainer, because animals beat the crap out of humans every day of the week. I would too. That she takes the things that she learned from fundamental basic behavior science and then analyzes everyday situations with those things, and then breaks down steps that raise the probability of doing the ideal thing. And so this gives you a fantastic introduction to essentially like basic applied behavior analysis. In other words, like, we have the situation where a person did a thing. What things caused the person to do this? And then what happened after they did that? And did that thing raise the probability they will do it again later? And if you have those pieces, then you can arrange any of them to change the probability of the outcome. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yes.
And so she puts it in detail for the intelligent reader. So she assumes zero knowledge, of behavior science. She does assume literacy. And so it turns into a lovely and challenging read with lots of legitimate examples from everyday life. And I recommend it. It literally like puts things into steps.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, guys. I think that might have been the only one that I've seen thus far. I'm sure that there are more ones. Cool. Coach Mo. What's up,
Mo, what do you want?
I want to learn from you, Trevor. Hey,
Good.
so we're
Me too.
talking about we're talking about applied behavior analysis or just learning more about it as a coach. So where does the line between coach and therapy cross the line? Because that's as a fitness coach, I battle with that. And I think a lot of our students here have asked us those questions on calls before. It's like, yeah, this client, it's just the therapy versus coaching. So I guess, how do you see that?
So I will tell you that because therapy has a stigma attached to it, people will seek coaching in lieu of it. Because therapy, stigma just means if I say this, I get punished. Okay. So to avoid the punishment, but still tell people that, but still have the opportunity to tell people what they do for another source of positive reinforcement, they say, I got a coach. And so in this respect, yes, I would say that coaching substitutes for therapy in a lot of situations. I will also say that many people, how do I say this? Give me a moment. Also take advantage of that, by the way. Like say, give me like, also very good coaching tool, in my opinion. Give me a second to think about this so I can say what I want to say. That a person sees a clinician differs from having a clinical problem. At the same time, that a clinician can help a person differs from the person having a clinical problem. And so technically speaking, I would say now they have, quite frankly, the very similar topographies. Fancy word for saying you do similar stuff, okay? I will say, though, that if a person has a formal diagnosis of a thing and then goes to you and says, I want help with insert thing I have a formal diagnosis of, unless you have licensure to treat insert thing they have formal diagnosis for, then I recommend referring out. After that, I would say it comes down more to personal preference and level of comfort. So, or if a person, more specifically, self-diagnosis. And so if a person says, I have an eating disorder or clinically relevant prescribable condition, unless you have licensure to treat something like that, I would say no. Does that kind of help draw a line?
Yeah, because I think like as a coach, if you dive deeper into behavioral analysis, you kind of become a practical psychologist, and in a funny way. So it's like,
yeah, people do a lot of dumb stuff, and we want to help them do less dumb stuff.
Yeah,
like so, I mean, I've just come to fall in love with that, like because really, I look at behavior in coaching and all this stuff this way. We have behaviors that we do too many times, and we want to do them less. And we have behaviors we do too few times, and we want to do them more. If you find some other option, please let me know.
Love it.
How does a psychologist diagnose? They say, you did this thing too many times, even if too many times equals 1.
Yeah.
By the way. Or they say, you do this thing too few times. You smile too few times. You shower too few times. You exercise too few times. You have depression. Right? So if you look at the diagnostic process, they really just like, they try to quantify what behaviors do you do too many times? What behaviors do you do too few times? And of those things, they put a label. And I just say, screw the label. What behavior causes problems? What behavior gives solutions? Let's do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. Guys, let's do one, possibly 2 more. Anybody have anything else? If not, that is okay too.
I have one. I just want time to
cool.
Tip it.
We'll go. Let's see if we can squeeze in Ethan. And who was that just spoke up?
Me, Britt Franks.
Britt, cool. And then we'll jump to you, Ethan, very next. And then we'll wrap it up from there, guys.
Okay, so I have a lot of clients who have followed my program. They're doing good. They're seeing results. Weekly check-ins are awesome. We'll get on a coaching call and they're like, thumbs up, I'm feeling good. And I want to go deeper with them. I want them to be able to open up. I feel like there's other things that we could be accomplishing or getting into. And sometimes they're just like, yeah, I'm feeling good. And it's just kind of there. So I'd like to know how to navigate that, or maybe some questions to help them dive deeper.
Got it. Okay. I will say that just sounds like a you problem. And I mean that in a complimentary way. Like you might want more for them than they want for themselves. Now, if you legitimately feel like they hide things from you, I consider that a different sort of issue. And in a situation like that, the group call situation has a lower probability of people revealing personal stuff they would want you to help them with. Mm-hmm. And I just go right to honesty. If you think a person hides something like that from you, you can call them up and say, I think you hide this thing from me and I want to help you with it. Tell me what you think about me helping you with this thing. And they might say, wonderful, I would love for you to help me with this thing I have hid from you this whole time. But who has conversations like that? Absolutely nobody. So what happens? Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds silly, but like, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a very great answer, because it sounds as though you just answered the question for yourself in a way, Britt. It's just literally taking that to the client, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say, I want to help you with this thing. I will do it for free or I will do it for more money. Insert upsell here or insert opportunity here, whatever sort of method you choose. Because it might just mean like, hey, I want to sell you more stuff because it looks like if I sold you this stuff, it would help you more times. And I want to help you more times. So buy this more stuff. And they might say, great, I want you to help me more times too. I will give you more money for you to help me more times.
Yeah, insert back-end offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
For real though, like again, peel it back. What problem do you want to solve? If you want to help them with more stuff, then say, hey, I want to help you with more stuff. Tell me what it would take for you to help you with more stuff. The answer might surprise you. Insert clickbait.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Ethan, man, let's round out with you, and then we'll give Dr. Kashey a gracious thank you and get on with the weekend.
Thanks, Dr. Kashey, for everything so far. So my question, at what point, because you come from a research background, and obviously your depth of knowledge is like black hole level knowledge base, right? Like at what point does that become a negative return for someone who's not clinically based and like, I'm doing research just for research sake, and that's just like mental masturbation of like, do I really need to go down this level of a rabbit hole to provide value to clients? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. But like vitamin D, do I need the 600-page paper? Probably not, but I probably need to know enough to provide value and a reasonable answer. So where do you find that balance?
I got tingles. I think you answered your fantastic question for one, and two, I think you answered it. So I will tell you that yes, at some point, it took me 5 years and a million philosophy books to figure out a strategy means decide ahead of time. One, you can also steal that from me, and that saves you a ton of time. For one, okay? So if you find somebody that you trust, me or somebody else that says things that you like, and if you have some operational understanding of that thing, that'll give you that level of confidence, right? So for me, I just see it as like, I did all that stuff so you can do the stuff that matters. So to give you an idea, okay? Now, I will tell you that if we go back to the honesty route, I will tell you, I'll get to that in a second, that I 100% separate the intellectual mental masturbation stuff, great term, with the helping people do more smart stuff, less dumb stuff. I will cuddle up with a book that has formulas as much as the next person, okay? Now I use that, I just do that instead of watch cartoons. And so to your point, I do have entertainment value, intellectual stimulation, et cetera, over here. And then I have applied stuff over there. I think if you try to take that stuff and apply it from here to there, that gets you in trouble. That just turns into you impressing people maybe and confusing them. But really, like if you have the beatus, then take a walk after you eat. Do I have to teach you about the islets of Langerhans? No. Although I could if you wanted, different product. So to your point now, back to intellectual honesty, you just say, you know what? I know nothing about this and I will tell you tomorrow. And nobody will argue with you. Not really. They already hired you. And so like you can respond with, I know a little bit, although I want to do some research so that I make sure I have the right answer. I'll report back to you, insert time and date here, date and time there. And that will cover all your bases. To simplify this, do your research as needed. Even I hate the term needed. I'd say do research when the clients ask you to do something and you think it would help them if you did research for it. There. Does that like make you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Do it for them, not for you. If you want to do it for yourself, great. Just like, again, entertainment versus practical value. And I will end with this, that a lot of like armchair science dork people, they like n equals 1, meh. Like, okay, you have n equals 1, you have a study of 1, then you have n equals 1,000, the gold standard, blind placebo, yada, 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 okay? Yes, I agree that the double-blinded, double-secret, black belt, placebo-controlled trial beats n equals 1. I will tell you that n equals 1 times 1,000 beats everything. That makes you better at coaching. Because the n equals 1,000 says, this kind of maybe works for a huge array of people. I give 2 craps about a huge array of people. I care about Ethan. Fight me, And so like, I care less about the problem and care more about your problem. So I will do what it takes to help you. Sometimes that means referencing n equals 1,000 stuff. Sometimes that means like, what problem do you want to solve? Does vitamin D even matter? Maybe you have trouble determining that. And what do you say? I have trouble determining if this even matters. So I want to talk to someone else and get back to you. It just goes back to telling the truth, and telling the truth in a violent and convicted way. Because a lot of people try to hide it, and that looks silly. But it like, I know jack crap about this. I feel comfortable I can learn it though. So like, I'll get back to you in a minute. And I think you can do just that, man.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's great.
Cool.
And that term I love, violent and convicted way. That's a nugget right there. Thank you, Dr. Kashey. This has been fantastic. Guys,
Absolutely.
Make sure, Dr. Kashey, can you maybe just let everybody know where they can follow you, keep up with your stuff, your research? And I know you have a product that you're working on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I have just completed a first course of a few on basically the equivalent. Basically, I made a graduate level behavior science course and took all of the material and turned it into do this on yourself and see what happens, bro. So when that gets finished, I will let everybody know. But basically, I have like a pretty heavy duty science-based behavior course that I finished a nice chunk of, that to your point about practical application, took as much of it as humanly possible of like, we'll run this experiment, guess the guinea pig, and running yourself through that to show like, yeah, science works whether you want it to or not. And I have that sort of vibe, okay? Like I'd make the joke, like if I hold up a head of broccoli and I punch you in the face a bunch of times, and then you go to the supermarket and see a head of broccoli, do you know what happens? Your heart rate goes up. What do heart rates have to do with broccoli? Absolutely nothing until you punch somebody in the face a bunch of times. And you know what we call that in the biz? Learning. Learning. And it gives you an idea of like, okay, people learn to do silly things. Why do they learn to do silly things? Because the outcomes get paired in weird ways. So like that gives you a little like teaser. You can find me at Dr. Kashey on the social medias. I will get back to posting on there soon. I got bogarted for like the last year in a crazy project that I just finished like 10 days ago. So a lot of this pent up energy just came from activity deprivation. Okay. And so I actually got to go back to this project for the first time in a while. So I have quite a few videos, short videos, et cetera, on Instagram, TikTok, that sort of thing. You can learn a bit more about the philosophy and the sort of stuff that I do at trevorkasheynutrition.com. We have a Kickstart program, have professionals run through it all the time. And they take lots of the material and use it with their own clients. That just goes through a lot of this sort of stuff, okay, with emphasis on food, doing less dumb stuff, more smart stuff. Like, people say counting calories doesn't work. Well, that's like saying I counted my money and I'm still poor. And so like, I counted my money 1,000,000 times and I'm still poor. Well, I counted my calories. And so like now you help provide context for a lot of the stuff that people, again, just like the silly rules that people make up for themselves. So it focuses a lot more on really the language that people have. And then after I indoctrinate people with how to make rules that make sense, only then do they get access to a coach. So that basically, you know, as well as anybody else, it takes 12 weeks for anybody to get their crap together. And so I just took that 12 weeks and turned it into a get your crap together here first, and then you actually get your money's worth over here. And so to give you an idea of just the structure. And so I do have human facilitators. We call them facilitators, like, because they facilitate your learning. They help you learn more stuff when you do this thing. And so actually have a legitimate program here with people running it. And then you get the one-on-one coaching only after you've gone through that program. And then you get the best of both. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the sort of structure that I operate with, to the sort of feeder system that I use to make sure they get the most value.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fantastic, man. Thank you so much, Dr. Kashey. Appreciate you. And guys, I'll link Dr. Kashey's Instagram in Slack or on this post, and you guys, I'm sure, can find him. And thank you, brother. Hope you have a great weekend. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.